Hello everyone, my name is Jen and welcome to The Book Refuge. Alright friends, it is time for another weekly reading wrap up, and this week I was cruising through some stuff. I did read a few novellas and fan fictions, but I also had three anticipated releases, so I'm very excited, as well as I continued to binge one of the Alien series that I fell in love with, which I actually just put up a video about the last 10 sci-fi romances I read, so if you haven't watched that yet, go check that out. I actually was surprised with how far I had to go back, and while you're doing that, make sure you go ahead and like this video, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I'm getting so close to hitting 20K. If I could hit that by Christmas, it would just make my year. It made me so happy because that is so beyond what my stretch goal for myself was. It would make me so happy. A little bit of business, of course, before we get to the books. I know this part's boring, but one of the things that's very important for me to mention is that I no longer have a P.O. box. Now, I couldn't retroactively go back and remove my P.O. box from almost 600-700 videos that I've had it for. So I'm hoping that people see this. I'm going to post it on my community page again. But the P.O. box just wasn't really like worth it for me, because it's either where you get like unsolicited packages, or it's where, you know, I mean, I liked that authors were able to send me stuff there, but now I'm going to put a little note down there. You can just email me, or if we're on Instagram, you can DM me if you would like to send me something, because that way I can a little bit more control what's coming to me, because I have a different place that I can have it sent, instead of to that P.O. box, which was costing a good amount of money to, for the most part, just sit there, because most PR agencies, authors, friends, they all reach out to get my address anyway. So it was only unsolicited stuff that's going there anyway, right? So there we go. Speaking of sending me stuff as well, this is always weird, but if you would like to send something to me, I always have my Goodreads. My Amazon wish list is down below. I'm very excited for Christmas time. And then also one other thing, if you would like to get something for yourself for Christmas or for a loved one, of course, don't forget about the Etsy shop. I have these awesome potholder gift sets that I am in love with. Like, I have a couple of these Harry Potter pair. They just have like Harry Potter on the back. These are cool. I think these ones are supposed to be from like Goblet of Fire or something, because I have the dragons. But then there are these cute blue snowflakes. They have red on the back. And then there is these ones that have the reindeer on the front and those on the back. Then of course we have our book sleeves in all the different winter patterns. And the surprising winner lately has been these little stocking stuffers that I made. I have honestly used up a whole pack of these already because of my cold, but they fit a little travel tissue pack in them. Or honestly, they also fit like, you know, tampons and some of the small pads if you want as well. I've seen some people do that. But these are a fun little stocking stuffer that's available. So I always have a link to my Etsy shop down below as well, and you can use the Book Refuge 10 for 10% off of that. So yeah. That's that. Then we have two new patrons to welcome to the channel. One of them, she's asked to remain anonymous. So hi, Anonymous A out there. Thank you so much for your support. I appreciate it. And then Danielle is the other one. So Danielle's been a big fan and supporter of the channel for a long time, and I really appreciate it. So thank you so much for keeping me going, So all of my notes are done. Time to get into the books, because we have a lot to talk about. The first book that I finished last week was Freeing Luca by Victoria Aveline. So this one is book 2 in the Clacanian series, okay? So this one was one that I talked about this in also my Audible Plus recommendation video, because the first book, Choosing Theo, which I read last week, was in, or the week before, was in that. And it turns out all of those books are on AnyPlay as well, if that is a service that you have. I talked about that before. But I ended up buying them because during the Audible sale, they were only $2.50 a piece, and I was too lazy to check AnyPlay. But Freeing Luca takes place kind of like, it overlaps with the first book. So go back and watch my review of Choosing Theo. This one, like I said, I'm not going to go into depth about because I went really in depth about Choosing Theo in that one. But Freeing Luca, Luca is actually undercover with the Prick organization, which I can't remember the what that acronym is, but it's some of the aliens who are kidnapping the women and testing the breeding, how it's working with them. And the organization ends up spelling prick, so haha, we have a little funny joke about that. But Luca ends up giving himself away because he's so angry with what's happening that he doesn't keep his cool. So he ends up getting forcefully roped in to this organization even more than he was before, and he ends up getting injected with some stuff that will ramp up his like sexual desire and his like stuff like that. So if a woman gets put in with him, he'll like want to breed her and not like think about it, you know? So yeah, he gets put in kind of an awkward position with our heroine, who is Alice, who is one of the women who was kidnapped with, she was kidnapped at the same time as the heroine from the first one. Is her name Jade? I think it's Jade. There's a lot of names in this one. Actually, I could just look. Yeah, her name is Jade. See, I had it in my notes even. Let's just go back a little bit. But where Jade had like escaped from them and was then able to make her way, you know, she was brought in as like a guest instead of a, you know, a captive. Alice is a captive, and she keeps getting put in with Luca. So they are in a rough place together. But it becomes clear that these two are mates, and so now they just need to escape, help get these other women free, and continue about the series, basically. So I feel like that was one of the worst explanations that I've done, but like I said, I'm trying to be a little more light-handed with some of those and not give away everything, but also spare myself some time. So there you go. That's a quick version of it. Okay, next up was a fan fiction. Like I said, I did read quite a few this week, and it was amazing. So happy to be reading some fanfics. So I read All You Want by Sin Yu. So if you don't know, or maybe you do, but didn't know this author had other fanfics, Sin Yu is the author of Manacled. So my first fanfic author that I, you know, read in this journey, in my more recent journey. And I've read a couple other things by her too. They've been like shorter ones. But this is one that I've had it on my Kindle since literally after I finished Manacled, I went and downloaded some. But this one was Omegaverse, and I just hadn't had the best luck with Omegaverse, so I put it off. But when I went back to it and checked it out, I saw that it was just a Dramini Omegaverse, so it wasn't a, you know, it wasn't an MM one. It wasn't going to have an MPreg. It wasn't going to have any of that. And I was like, you know what? I trust Sin Yu. Let's give this a go. So I gave it a go. And I have to say, I recommend this for two types of people, and then I'll tell you what it's about. I recommend it if you are a Dramini fan, but you're hesitant about Omegaverse. And if you're an Omegaverse fan, but you haven't tried fanfiction yet, and you've wanted to, but Manacled looks too big, and it's too over the top, but you're familiar with Omegaverse, and you love it, I think that this is good for like both of the cross sections of people. So I will have the link down below to the Archive of Our Own listing for it. You need to know how to download a fan fiction to your device. I have made videos about that before. It is also on my Instagram. If you look under my fanfiction readathon, like saved highlights, I have all the step-by-step instructions how to do that. So this one is an 8th year fic, and Hermione is back at Hogwarts, and she's a latent Omega. Nobody tested her to see if she was an Omega when she was young because it was thought that she was fully a Muggle. So by her presenting as an Omega at 19, there are a lot of issues. Number one, it now means that she definitely has wizarding blood in her family somewhere that either was like hidden or was like lost, because you would need to have that in you somewhere. Also, it means that she is now a very hot topic around there because she is an unbonded Omega. In the wizarding world, usually Omegas get married off before they ever present, and they are paired with an alpha or they're soul bonded to someone. So when they go through their first heat, they already have a partner. And so for her to be an unbonded Omega, and there are like 4 or 5 alphas at the school, they're all going to be gunning for her, you know, not from anything fully malicious, but just from instinct that she's an unbonded Omega, she's breedable, we want her. And so McGonagall is like, well, you know, why don't we get you paired up with someone? She's like, no, I don't want to be forced into that. I don't want that. So for her very first heat, which she doesn't even fully understand how it's going to feel, the way it's going to tear her apart, she signs up to be put in this room that's basically like there's no way out of it, and she's just going to have to like suffer through it. And then it happens to be that Draco is wandering by and he hears her screaming. And he busts his way through all the wards to see what's happening to her. And then it's too late because Draco's an alpha and he's in the room with her and he's feeling the push to her. But he's able to resist except for the fact that she is begging him to breed her. And so they do. And he stays there and fucks her through the whole thing. And then when it's over, eventually she just asks him to be her like fuck buddy, because even not during her heats, she still is extremely horny and the other alphas are still sniffing around her. And particularly there's a couple of instances where she almost goes too far with them because they can basically like coerce her into sex with them because they can use their alpha influence on her and make her, you know, feel like she wants it and all this stuff. So this ends up being kind of a slow burn, like I would call it like friends with benefits thing, because she asks him to be her fuck buddy and McGonagall actually gives them like a fuck pad at Hogwarts. Like literally gives them a room where they can meet up and do that, and it's almost like sanctioned by the school. Basically, it's wild. So I really enjoyed this one. Again, it wasn't overly long, and I think it's a great starter if you are interested in Omegaverse but have been nervous and maybe you loved Hermione, or if you loved Hermione and you're curious about Omegaverse. This one doesn't have any of the super uncomfortable things that I don't love about it. I thought it was great. It feels more like a fated mate, and a very like sexy one. So this one was a 4-star for me. It does rely very heavily on miscommunication, but it's the cute kind where like they were both pining for each other, and now because they are biologically drawn to each other, they feel like they can never fully be with the other person because they feel obligated to be with them. It's like that type of back and forth, and it lasts a little too long, so I gave it 4. It's a 4 on the spice scale. Of course, the kink in this one is breeding and fluids and dominating me and everything. And there are some trigger warnings for body betrayal, right? Because she's feeling attracted to people she normally wouldn't. And there's attempted essay. All right, then I had a novella. I finally read A Day Until Forever by Erin Langston. So now I am all caught up with all the books she's read, which is like a little sad because I wish I still had some to read. But hopefully she has her new book coming soon. And I am just about to reread Forever Your Rogue. I can't wait to do that for my 6-star rereads. But this one, we find out about Raymond, who is Lord Travers. So this is Nate's older brother, who is basically his father figure, because what we find out in this one is like Nate and his sister and him, like they're his half siblings, and he's quite a bit older than them. And the father is just kind of like doesn't really care too much. And so Raymond has been the one taking care of them, looking out for them, and eventually in this one he is trying to just take over them altogether and like be their, you know, advisor or whatever. And then we have Rosalie, who is a hellion in the making and a hopeless romantic. And this book actually takes place in like on Halloweens. So we see a Halloween from the past and then the present Halloween. So this does all take place in a day. And then we see a future Halloween when they're together. So we see these 3 different Halloween nights. And so there isn't a ton of like spice going on because this all happens in one day as they like fall for each other. But it didn't need any more than that because we're just seeing Rosalie and Raymond, how they got together, see her like really like his little brother and sister, and understand how this couple became who they are when we see them in Forever Your Rogue, who, you know, he's a stern but loving older brother, and he does give Nate a lot of crap sometimes because Nate is a ne'er-do-well. He's a rogue, and Raymond like expects more from him. But still adored this, gave it 4 stars. It's a 1.5 on the spice scale. Like I said, there's not too much happening, but they do have a tryst in here that we get to see. All right, now we're going to go through a bunch more of the alien ones. So like I said, I'm going to blow through these kind of quickly because I also read them very quickly. And even when I was filling my notes in, I was being confused about which one's which. But book 3 in this series was Saving Verico. This one is a like grumpy sunshine situation. And so now we get introduced to Lily, who Lily and Alejandra, which we'll get back to Alejandra, her book's coming soon. They are 2 of the women who were rescued in the last one, right? When they escaped the facility, when Alice and Luca like help bust everyone out, they escape. Now, some of these women just go with to the town. Did I write down the name of it? I don't think that I did. But there's the town that is like the good one, basically, where they will like let the women choose who they're with. And then there's some other ones who like aren't. But Lily and Alejandra escape and they go into the woods. And it turns out Lily is actually like a survivalist. On Earth, her parents were survivalists. And so she knows how to find food, find water, and keep herself safe. And she is doing that in this series. And eventually through this, she comes across a Verico who is in kind of a tight place, a tight situation. And they kind of sort of like save each other is what happens. Like she saves him first, but then he saves her later. And they end up being mates. And she has to decide if she wants to stay there for that or not. So yeah, this one was a 4-star and it was a 2 on the spice scale. Then there was Tempting Oswed, and this one was Oswed and Alejandra. So now we have Alejandra, and there's a point where Lily and Alejandra get separated, which happens in the one before. But Oswed gets sent. He's one of the, like, I'm going to call him a castle guard, but he's like a queen's guard or like whatever for the town. And they knew there was still one woman who was like lost out there. Because Lily and Verico end up telling. And so Oswed, being one of these like captain of the guard type person, gets sent out to find her. Now, there's a couple things about being on the queen's guard. Like, you're not allowed to take a mate or have a marriage. You basically are like, he's not sterilized, but he's taking a male birth control. He's not allowed to have a family or anything. He's devoted himself to the queen, right? And so it would be very inconvenient if you were to discover a mate or something like that. So on his way to rescue Alejandra, he finds her. She has accidentally crossed into a different territory that belongs to a different, like, again, I'm going to call it a kingdom, but like a different territory. And he has to kill a beast to save her. Now, this beast he kills is basically an endangered species. So even though it's trying to like eat them, he kills it and it's bad. And so they get caught by the guards of the other city. And then they make up this lie that they're actually an engaged couple so that she can't be taken by that other city, because they want human women too, that they can have their males around and see if they will be one of their mates. And they pretend that they're engaged. So this is like a fake engagement, but still they have to go to this city and they're forced to stay for a week, because since they haven't presented that they're mates, there's still a chance she may be someone else's mate. And so they make her go there, and she's allowed to stay with him as like his, you know, they get to stay together. But every day she has to go out and let other men come up and introduce themselves, make her kind of like smell them and see if she presents for one of them. So it's a bit awkward thing to see for them, right? So this one was probably like the sexiest one in the series, I will say that. But it also was pretty angsty. I mean, all of these are a little bit angsty in some way, but this one was probably the angstiest because Oswed is so sure he knows what he wants his life to be. Whereas a lot of the other men, even if they were a little resistant to it, they realize how great it is to find a mate and like what it means, you know? But Oswed is someone who like, he's fine being, you know, childless and mateless. He enjoys serving the queen. So there's some angst there. But yeah, this one was 4 stars and it was a 3 on the spice scale for me. And then there was Using Feiho, which was my favorite in the series. It is quite a few people's favorite in the series from what I heard. I know it's Jessen's favorite. And this one is book 5 in the series. This was actually the last one with an audiobook. So I do have the next ones downloaded on my Kindle. I just don't know when I'll get to those, because any physical reading I need to do this month needs to be my stack of rereads over here. And the reason I was able to get through all of these is because they were audiobooks. So yeah, don't know if I'll get to more. But anyway, using Feiho. So this one is about Feiho and Vanessa. And so we've met Feiho in a few of the previous ones. He is actually a like pirate basically. And so he travels a lot. And he's actually a citizen of like a different planet. But he's been granted like visitation and like is able to stay. Well, he gets granted the opportunity to be in the mating ceremony on this one town, basically, but nobody ever picks him, although they do pick him to be tried because they want to fuck him. They enjoy fucking him, and you are allowed to try them out during the ceremony, but no one ever picks him because he is a traveler, and no woman wants to be doing that, so no one ever picks him. Now, however, we have Vanessa, who needs to get back to Earth, because she has someone waiting on Earth. Like, she was taken kind of accidentally. Now, the aliens had done a lot of their like research about who they take. I forgot to say this, like they tried not to take people who were, you know, had a family or would be missed, because they didn't want to, like, you know, it's like any serial killer, right? They try to find the high risk victims, then no one will miss them, right? That's a little bit of what they did. That's my true crime self coming out, right? And so Vanessa, they know that Feiho travels, and so her plan is she has letters that are from some of the other women to back home, and basically she's going to use Feiho to get her close enough to Earth. There's a contact she's going to get in contact with who's supposed to bring her to Earth, because she needs to go there. And Feiho, he wants a wife. He wants a chance at that. And so when he gets picked, he's like, oh my gosh, finally, someone wants me for more than my magical sex skills. And someone really wants me. And it's just so sad, because we know, like, oh, this woman isn't planning to stay with you. So that's the angst in that one. But it is so good, because like Feiho is just such a great character, you guys. Like, he is like literally like a fuckboy who doesn't want to be one. And yeah, so this one was great. This one has some like real danger happening in it too, though. There were some really harrowing scenes in this one. So yeah, this one was my 5-star in the series, and it was a 2.5 on the spice scale. All right, so moving right along, I had another novella that I read. This one is a Christmas novella. Yes, I don't read too many of those. I only have a few Christmas books on my TBR this month, but If You Give a Grump a Holiday Wish List is from Anne Einerson. This is only her like 2nd or 3rd book out, I believe. I read an arc of hers earlier this year, and I wasn't a huge fan of it. I didn't like it, but it definitely wasn't like this. This is definitely your traditional holiday rom-com, has those good old Hallmark vibes, but with a good amount of spice, right? So this one is about Jack and Presley. Jack is a billionaire. Presley is his executive assistant, and she's been his assistant for 3 years. He has had a crush on her that whole time, but because she's his assistant, there's never going to be anything from it. And he's also a very like taxing boss. He's very demanding. It's very like stressful being his, and she's actually not went home for Christmas for like the last 2 years because he's kept her working through Christmas. You know, he's a bit of a Scrooge like that. Well, this year she has taken the time off. She let him know back in May that she'd be taking some Christmas time off. And even so, when she's about to get on her plane, he is like, where are you going? You can't leave. We have business acquisitions to do. And she's like, no, I'm going home to my family. And so Jack decides, well, I'm going to come home with you so that you can work whenever you're not doing stuff with your family, which again, so breaks like the HR rules and like time off stuff. But you know what? We roll with it. So he ends up coming home with her. And then when her family asks who this guy is, she's like, they can't know you're my boss because I complain about you to them. And if you say that you're my boss, they're going to chase you out of town. So he pretends to be her boyfriend, of course, which is completely his idea. And when he tells her parents that he's her boyfriend, who again, none of the family knew about at all, of course he has to stay at their house. And of course they stay in her childhood bedroom in her bed. So there we are. So yeah, this is him like being won over by her family and him staying there for the holidays, you know, and having the joy of a family at Christmas, because his family is very like detached and doesn't do anything for Christmas together, and it's very sad. So this was adorable. I don't have a ton of complaints about it. I mean, it hits all of the trigger points for being a fun little holiday novella. And so I gave it 4.5 stars. I rounded up to 5 for the Goodreads review. And it was a 3 on the spice scale for being a novella, which is pretty good. All right, then we had another fanfic. This one I'll talk about pretty quickly because I was pretty let down by it, I won't lie. This was called The Water Gau, and it is by Smoky Baltic. I was very excited by this one because I found it. I was actually searching on Goodreads. So if you don't know, not all fan fictions are listed on Goodreads. Sometimes people don't want to see criticism or stuff about their book, and so they're like, please stop putting my book on Goodreads. It's not a book. It's a fanfic. It shouldn't be on there anyway. But some of them are on there. And I was doing some like searching for fics on there. And The Water Gau was sold as like a survival situation for Hermione and Draco. And I was like, hey, that's me. I love those. But I felt a little let down by it. But anyway, what happens is this takes place as like in book 7, Malfoy Manor. Draco and Hermione ends up like apparating out of there. He sees what happens to her, the way she's tortured, and like Draco just snaps. Like, he's involved in the Death Eater cause because A, he's forced into it, and B, he didn't know what else to do and whatever. So he's been there. But he goes to apparate out, and Hermione catches a hold of him and is trying to apparate somewhere else. And so they end up apparating into like the middle of the Scottish wilderness. He is splinched, so he's injured. And neither of their wands are working. So they have a tiny, tiny bit of wandless magic they're able to do, like start a fire and stuff like that, but they are stranded. They have no idea where they are, and they don't know how to get anywhere. So they're in a pickle. So yeah, so this is it's not super long. It's only works out to be like 140 pages, you know, so it is novella length. And it, you know, it starts off with them being very like against each other, and Draco still acting like a jerk and not even wanting to help him survive. But because Hermione isn't an evil person, we start working towards that or whatever. But I was just disappointed where it did end, because it was just like, there was hardly any romance in it. I mean, they fool around a little bit because they're like only one blanket type thing, but I didn't really see the romance build. And then it's like, oh, now that we find safety, we're going to date after. I don't know. It had a very unsatisfying ending for me. So I gave this one 3.5 stars. I probably should have given it less. And it was only a 1 on the spice scale, so a little disappointed. All right, next up, I'm doing good time today. There was Howl for the Gargoyle by Catherine Moon. So this is book 2 in the Monster Smash series, which the first one was Games with the Orc. So this is the monster escort service. That's what we call this, the monster hookup service, right? And in this one, we have Raphael, who we met in the previous one. He's buddies with the hero in that one, and he is a gargoyle sex worker. And he's feeling a little disillusioned with it. We have the trope of like the disillusioned sex worker, where he's just kind of tired of the role that he has, and he has some like unsatisfied clients because he's not being as enthusiastic as he should be, which just makes me roll my eyes so hard about like what you're looking for. But Monster Smash is all about giving like the full perfect experience. Like, they're like high end, right? People need to be satisfied. But part of the reason he's unsatisfied is that a lot of the jobs he gets are with clients who really want to push him around because he can take it. So he's partnered with monsters, usually, who want to be able to go hard with him. And he just gets kind of tired with that. He doesn't always want to do it that way. Now, this client that he gets assigned, her name is Hannah, and she is a new werewolf, but she's also a rock star. And her band has just gotten like signed and is supposed to go on a tour, and she can't control herself during the full moons yet. And she's been going to these full moon hotels, basically, where they basically lock you in a room where you're safe to not hurt anyone for the full moon. And it's not a fun thing. It's a very like cold and like sad way to do it, but it is a safety thing for both them and other people. And she particularly gets very like horny around the full moon, and she doesn't feel safe having hookups anymore because she can get kind of violent and she's afraid of hurting someone. And so one of her friends suggests, hey, you should try Monster Smash, because they they can pair you with someone that won't get hurt, or someone who likes being rough, or who's been with a werewolf before and knows what to understand. And so enter Rafe, who he not only is like pretty impenetrable all the time, but he can fully turn to stone as well. So she can scratch, bite, do whatever, and it won't like permanently injure him. So yeah, when they first meet, like, she's very nervous about it. She's so worried she's gonna hurt him, and he's like, I promise, you can't hurt me. Let's do it. And she comes to see him first, though, when it's not a full moon, because she just really wants to make sure. But anyway, they begin they have their first night hookup. They have a great connection. And then she basically, like, books him for the next 6 months on the full moons. But she still isn't sure if she's gonna be able to do her tour, because how's it going to work? So you can maybe see a few things I'm like hinting at while trying to explain this one, but they were just so sweet together. And mostly what's great about this series is the scenarios that we have, right? Like, this is basically an erotic novel, like the series is, but they're still always so touching. Like, you always see the really like touching sides of like sex in this, and I like that. So some of the kinks in this one, though, is like this has primal play, because she likes to hunt before she pounces and stuff. There is some like, switching where they take turns like doming each other. Like, when she's the werewolf, she really likes to be in charge, including a scene of pegging in this one, which is great. But it's also very interesting because like his ass, like, I'm just gonna say his ass is like so hard. So if you think about how you're able to stretch out a stone sphincter, it's very interesting. I don't know another way to say it. But yeah, and also like monster sex, when he, like, because he can turn himself to stone like whenever he wants to, but also when he comes, he will like turn to stone. And this one also touches on the thing of like sometimes, men who take longer to come. So one of the things for Rafe is that he is there to be someone's like pleasure device. Like, he's a sex worker, and so it's rarely gets to ever be about him. And Hannah's someone who wants to explore where they both get to have pleasure. So that's all I'll say about that. I had a great time with this one. There's a trigger warning for a stalker, not the hero, so keep that in mind. It led to a few tense things. So I gave this one 4.5 stars, and it was a 4 on the spice scale. Really liked it. Alrighty. Now we're going to get to some long-winded ones here. I'm going to try my best. I'm going to try not to go over every little detail of this book, but it was a 6-star read for me, I'll tell you right off the bat. So it was God of Fury time from Rena Kent. This is book 5 in her Legacy of the Gods, and this one is Brandon King and Nikolai Sokolov. So that is the Mafia Prince and the Golden Boy, who is seen as the good one in the twin dynamic that is Landon and Brandon King. And this book, like quite a few of the others, is taking place like at the same time as a few of the others. It starts the night of the initiation, and that is when Nikolai starts to be kind of obsessed with Brandon, and he wants to play with him, and he finds him attractive too, because Nikolai is bisexual, and he very much just feels attracted to everything. So there's kind of this joke about like, of course I'd be bisexual because it's just twice as many people that I can fuck type of thing. Like, he is a fuckboy, hardcore, but he still has a little bit of that like psychoticness to him, he likes violence, and he also literally like does have manic episodes. It's touched on. He has medication for that, but he doesn't like to take it because it messes him up. And so what he'll do instead, and we learn, it's very interesting to learn this because we've seen how Nikolai is in previous books. And, sorry, I'm like jumping ahead to some things. Of course, Rena is going to say this. She says, you can read this as a complete standalone. She's going to say that. Now, I don't really feel that way, as you know that I do. However, like, because a lot of the books take place at the same time, it's that type of situation where like, yeah, you can read it as a standalone, but you still should read them all because they fit into every story, you know. This is very connected to the previous book because it's Nikolai's sister and his brother. And so that stuff is going on at the same time. And it adds a whole nother layer to drama we saw in the previous book when we know that the drama about Landon and Mia being together is magnified by the fact that these two are having a secret relationship. That's another trope in this. So when Nikolai has these like manic episodes, that is why he's so violent that we see in previous books, you know? So yeah, I don't want to like spoil things about this one. I'm really trying to be vague about it, and we'll have a tiny little spoiler section because I have to talk about some stuff that I love. But to not do the spoiler part. So that's like Nikolai. He becomes fascinated with Brandon. He wants him. Brandon doesn't see himself as gay. He honestly isn't super sexually attracted to anyone. Learn more about that in the book. But he at first is just very annoyed and almost threatened, not like fully like he's scared, but very annoyed with how Nikolai becomes obsessed with him and is low-key stalking him, like showing up when he does his morning runs. Brandon very much has a routine he follows every day. He does it to keep himself in line. He gets anxious about certain things, so it's like everything has to be in order to keep me on track. And yeah, so he's just going about his life trying to keep his twin in line, trying to be there for his sister, like all that jazz, right? And then there's this psycho mafia prince who is coming after him and pushing his buttons and hitting on him all the time. And he's just like, I'm not gay. Stop doing this. Stop touching me. And Nikolai's like, I don't know, man. I think you might be, you know. So there's some of that. Some people might not like that aspect to it. But when we get deeper into Brandon, like Nikolai could sense something, and I like that. So yeah, so these two, to continue to kind of like graze over what the main part of this is, eventually this becomes like I would never even really call them like enemies to lovers, because they're not really enemies besides like what like their families might be, except for like Nikolai like pecking at him. I don't know. I never fully felt like it was an enemies to lovers thing. It was more of, you know, complete like disinterest to lovers. But there is a secret relationship that forms. This is a gay awakening for Brandon. This has some BDSM dynamics in it. Yeah, forced proximity of being close by. So yeah, those are kind of the non-spoilery thoughts of this. Some of the like kinky things to know are like there's some public sex. Nobody sees them, but there's some public stuff. There's lots of dirty talking in here. And yeah, a lot of like firsts for Bran type of thing. So yeah, I gave this one 6 stars, mostly for what I'm going to talk about in this spoilery section real quick. And yeah, and it was 4.5 on the spice scale. Like there was a lot of stuff in here. So I'm going to put the book down, put a picture with a spoiler warning on, and now I'm going to talk about why this was a 6-star for me, because it involves some spoilers. So just wait till you see the next book held up if you don't want to know anything. So yeah. So, the trigger warnings for this, which I know I didn't talk about in the non-spoiler section, but anyone who reads the book, Rena has a full page of what the spoilers are. Now, this time around with the spoilers, because usually her trigger warnings have to do with the story. And you know how I am. If I want people to know the trigger warnings if they need to, but I really trust Rena Kent with this series specifically. So I didn't read the trigger warnings going in because I was like, whatever they are, I know they're going to work for the story, so I'm not going to worry about them. But they involve borderline personality or disorder, mental health issues, depression, suicidal thoughts, and self-harm. There's also minor sexual assault, a suicide attempt, and violence. So there was some heavy ones, and I'm kind of, in this case, I'm glad I didn't look. Even though I fully understand why people would need to know those, because the self-harm in here is gone into quite detailed, and the suicide attempt in this one, whew, that came out of nowhere to me, and it was devastating, because it wasn't a previous suicide attempt. We see a real-time suicide attempt of Brandon in this, and it was devastating. So to go into some of those triggers, what made this work? I, of course, loved the push and pull dynamic all the way through that. And I loved how Brandon was being awakened. So Brandon, he ends up like, he basically was asexual, and he's felt some pull to men, but after some stuff that happens to him as a kid, he just really stopped pursuing either, and he ended up just going with girls and kind of forcing himself through any sexual situations. He's never liked sex before. Now, whether that is just because he wasn't having the emotional connection, which will go to the part of his asexuality that we get into in this book, or whether it's just because he should have explored with men, but he never did. Either way, he has never enjoyed sex, and he's always had to force himself through it, like force himself to be aroused for the women that he was with. He hated getting blowjobs. He hated being touched. He didn't like any of it, and he always forced himself into it until he has Nikolai, who is attracting him in ways he could never imagine. And we start to see, like, as he becomes more fascinated by Nikolai and the way Nikolai just won't give up, he becomes truly like invested in him, and that's when like sexual arousal comes very easily to him now. Nikolai is fully the feral golden retriever in this. Now, this doesn't mean like Nikolai doesn't have any issues. He does have, as I mentioned, like he has this like borderline personality disorder and manic stuff. And as I was saying, a lot of his like violent tendencies that we see him have in the previous ones is sometimes when he's having a manic episode. And so a lot of the fights that he does are because he needs to get out this aggression, because it's either that or he has to take these pills, and he really doesn't want to do that. And like his dad doesn't want him to have to do that either, because he knows how it makes him feel, but sometimes he will take them when it's just too much. But that's why there's so many like fights we see him in the series, and like we see those fights revisited here. His cousin like will fight with him because he knows he needs it. Like that's why he will let him like beat him up. And those times when he gets in fights with like Lan, you know, and they have these huge fights they have, a lot of it is like helping. I mean, Lan doesn't know that he's helping, but that is Nikolai helping with this. So to move along through that, because I'm not going to go through like the entire parts of the book, I'm going to talk about why this was a 6-star, which had to do with a lot of the reveals at the end of this. So through it all, like we know that Bran hurts himself. He cuts himself. He will pull his hair. And he has a lot of like inferiority feelings. Like Lan, of course, doesn't help with this because just the way he is, he's not sensitive. So there's a lot of the things that he has done and said over the years that makes Bran feel less than him, where like Lan wasn't trying to make him feel less than him. And we learned some of that in Landon's book as well. Like in the previous book, we knew that Lan literally sees Brandon as a half of him. And so he's hard on Bran because he's hard on himself type of thing. Anyway. But there was something that happened to Bran when he was 15. He was sexually assaulted by a woman who is close to the family. And so this woman was around all the time, and she had multiple times assaulted him. And he had said no, but he didn't believe, like, he never told anyone, because how would he explain that a woman raped him? He's like, there's something wrong with me that a woman was able to rape me, right? And so ever since that happened, like his art has never been the same. That's when he became like this very like self-harming, hurting type of person. And so when we get to where this all like blows up, Nikolai and him, there's a lot of ups and downs, of course, in their relationship. There's also the effect that Lan and Mia's relationship has on their relationship, because Nikolai like does not want Mia anywhere near Lan, and Brandon is like, but you want to be with me, so my brother can't be with your sister? Like, that's not a fair thing. So that leads to a lot of issues with him too. But looking past the issues, there comes to a point where things are finally working out, and Nikolai comes home to visit Brandon and the family. And of course, poor Levi, all 3 of his kids are with like the crazy people, right? The Bratva kids. But at the same time that they're there, this woman who had raped Bran is there. And she is, of course, being very like, oh, you're never going to last. Like, who are you? Like, he doesn't really like men. Like, you're forcing yourself on him. And Nikolai's just like, back off, bitch. Like, no, he's mine. And this woman, in her absolute delusion about what she thinks is gonna work on Nikolai, she sends Nikolai a video of one of the times that she raped Bran. Which, to be honest, I want to mention this because when I was talking about this book with my friend, this is, even though this leads to like some of the best stuff in the book, this part doesn't fully make sense because this scene, this assault that she recorded is very clearly an assault because Bran is saying, no, stop, don't, but not like pushing her away, but saying like, no, I don't want to. I don't like sex. Don't do this. And she's like, just be quiet. You just need me to make a man out of you. And he's saying no. And she literally covers his mouth and stuff. So my thought is, I'm like, why would you send that to someone and think that it proves like what? Bran likes pussy more than dick? Number one, it's when he was 15. You can tell he's younger in the video. And number two, no one who sees that video is going to think this was a consensual thing. So a bit of the weakness of the story of me is like, I wish there had maybe not been like sound in it, but yet Nikolai is able to see from the body movements that he doesn't want it, or like knows that, oh, this is the thing that did it. Because how would this bitch, because she sends this to Nikolai as a like jab at him. It did feel like a weakness to the story to me in this pinnacle moment of like, what was her logic in sending this? I know we can say she thinks she's so crazy that she thinks that it was all consensual, but like there had to have been a better scene to pick where he's literally saying no and trying to push her away, and she rapes him anyway. So as soon as Nikolai sees this, he's like, that fucking bitch. This is what it is. This is the thing. And as he's watching this video, Brandon comes in the room, sees him watching it, and is like, oh my God, now he's going to know how broken that I am. And Nikolai had like broken the glass he was drinking out of, and Brandon takes that and literally tries to kill himself in front of Nikolai because he's like, I can't bear how he's going to look at me now. So that absolutely crushed me, and I now understand why Shane East said that this book made him cry like a baby. I had been waiting for this. Shane East does these little like updates about the books that he's reading, and when he was narrating this one, he said, I can't tell you yet which book this was, but a book that I read today, I had to stop recording and cry for 20 minutes before I could like get all ready to record again. And later on, he said, it was God of Fury. It's coming soon. And I was like, what is it going to be? There are multiple points in this book that it could have been. Shane East and Teddy Hamilton, the whole cast who does this narration, it's a transcendent experience. Like it's amazing. So anyway, I need to get on with this. The stuff that comes after that suicide attempt and the way that his family has to talk through the scenes with Lan, where Lan is just devastated. It's the most emotional we see Lan in the whole thing, of him just being like, how dare you take away my other half? Like, what are you doing? Like, let me help you, know, all these things. The writing there was just so good, in my opinion. It was so good. And the revenge that Nikolai and Lan get on this woman, I've never been so happy for that type of violence in my life, I just say. Okay, moving on, because where are we at already? Okay, next up is Mafia Virgin by Mila Finelli, and I don't have much to say about this one because it's coming out next week. And unlike with God of Fury, where like it's out now, people can read it. Like, I'm not going to have a spoiler section for this one here because it's not out yet. But yeah, this is the 5th, and I believe it's going to be the final book in the Kings of Italy, because she didn't have an epilogue that hinted at a next one in this one, which is what she did in the previous ones. But you know, Mila Finelli, she does say there'll be more books soon. So I assume she's going to have a new series coming next. We'll see what's coming for her. But this one is a forced marriage for the both of them. So this is Emma and Giacomo. So Emma is the last sister who isn't married, and she is going to medical school, but her father is sick. The rest of the family doesn't know her father's sick. And one of the like heads of the family shows up and is trying to force Fausto and Giacomo to make a deal and work together, because they're still causing some like spats between them. And so they say the best way to do this, we're gonna force a marriage. And Fausto's like, my daughter's 5, like, you're not marrying her to anybody. And he's like, no, your sister-in-law Emma. And he's like, no, we've already forced one of my wife's sisters to marry somebody. We don't need to do this. And he's like, no, you have to do it. And they both say no. Well, then the guy shows up, kidnaps Emma, and forces Fausto at point of a gun, basically. There's someone in Fausto's life that he could hurt. And this guy's like, you're going to marry her, and you have 6 months to get her pregnant. And if you don't, then I'm going to kill people that you love, blah, blah, blah. So they're both forced into this marriage. Now, in the beginning of it, neither of them wants anything to do with each other. But of course, we'll see where the arc of this goes. So this one has some, so it's enemies to lovers. It's a big age gap. They're forced into the marriage. Both of them are forced into it. And yeah, this one also has trigger warnings for cancer and terminal illness of a parent, murder, violence, torture, all those good things. This one also has some kinky, it has breeding kink, of course. It has spanking, and the hero is pierced. Also, something that I liked, not to spoil it, is that though Emma is a virgin, no spoiler there, it's called Mafia Virgin, she is one of the virgins who's very curious and interested to have a man at her disposal to like check some things out with, so that's always fun. So yeah, now like my ratings on this one, I did give this one 4 stars. It's a 3.5 on the spice scale. This was still like a great book. It was really quick to get to. I think part of it is too is that I started Mafia Virgin, then I read God of Fury, then I finished Mafia Virgin, and it just feels a little like lackluster after reading God of Fury. That's not this book's fault. But also when I was lining up all of the books in my head, like how I feel about the series as a whole, Mafia Virgin is probably tied with Mafia Mistress for like my least favorite, because my favorite one is still, which one is my favorite? My favorite is still probably Mafia Madman, and then Mafia Target, Mafia Darling, and then Mafia Virgin, Mafia Mistress is probably what I'm at. I did like how much we see and like interact with some of the other sisters in this one and everything. But yeah, this one, it was a 4-star read for me. It was not bad. It still read really quick. It was still sexy. But there was a few, like, his jump to loving her came out of nowhere for me. Like, I'm just saying, like, we were still at the enemies, part of the enemies to lovers, and then he was like, I love her. I can't lose her. And I was like, well, okay. So yeah, moving along, I had one of my rereads that I did. So it was In Silence and Submission by Jillian Eliza. This is a Dramini fanfic. This one is a BDSM, friends to lovers, BDSM as healing, traumatized by war, Hermione, and yeah, her and Draco embark on this adventure, and it's one of my 6-star reads. So this one is a 4 on the spice scale. Something I want to share though, is this one has a couple kinks that I really, really love. One of them is cockwarming, which I am hoping to do a video for soon, because there are actually quite a few books I've read recently. By quite a few, I mean like 5 or 6 I've read recently that have this. So that's almost enough to do a like oddly specific rec video. So coming soon. But yeah, this one has cockwarming, spanking, bondage, shirabi, all the good stuff. It has trigger warnings for depression, an abusive previous relationship, and survivor's guilt. All right. Now the last book I have to talk to, and this is another one. We'll get to it. So this is one I've had on my Kindle for a while. When it came out, I snagged it because it was another MF romance from Lilith Vincent. So Lilith Vincent wrote like Brutal Intentions and like, I can't remember the other one, but it was like really taboo romances, big age gaps. One was like a stepfather one, stuff like that. Love it. Love it. And so I snagged this one. And so it's just been sitting in my Kindle Unlimited, and I was going to get rid of it. And then I was like, well, let me give it 50 pages. I was just in a mood. I just finished, I think I just finished Mafia Virgin, and I was like, let me read this one real quick, because it was only like 250 pages. So I was like, let's go. So this one is a Labyrinth reimagining. And if you remember Labyrinth, I actually read the book as a kid a lot, but there's also the film about it. And it's about this girl who her younger brother gets like kidnapped. So this is a reimagining of that. So we have Tyrant, yes, what a apropos name, who is a mafia boss in the area. Her father owes him a lot of money. Her father, she's only been staying with him for a couple years because her mother just recently died, and then she went to stay with her father and his new wife, and they have a new baby, and she is obsessed with her baby brother. She loves him so much. And Tyrant comes to collect money from her father, and because he can't pay, he takes the boy, who I think his name is Bowen. He takes him, and he's like, if you don't get me this money within a week, I'm going to kill your kid. So it's like, whoa, very, very dark. So he takes him and goes. Now, our heroine, Vivian, is not going to let this happen. So she actually sneaks into his car and goes back to his estate with him. And of course, he figured out that she jumped in his car. And so he's like, I'm going to kill you and your little brother. And she's like, how could you do that? He's a baby. And he's like, a baby grows in to be a human who causes me problem, you know, or grows up to be an adult who causes me problems and everything. And she's like, please let me trade myself for him. Let me do that. And he's like, no. I don't think your father will be incentivized enough to save you, because it seems that he doesn't really care about you at all. So it's like, wow, dark stuff. So he has this maze in his estate that even has like moving doors and like changing things. And he puts her in the beginning of this labyrinth and is like, if you can make it into my house within 2 days, I'll give you your little brother and you can go home. And of course he doesn't expect her to be able to do it. And something that happens within this story, which like I didn't want to like spoil it, is this story is actually told in present time, the past, and then present time again. And the part that I've just explained is in the past part of it. Because where we start this book, and you don't know fully any of this, is that she is basically Tyrant's like unwilling mistress. Not like, it's not like he's like forcing her too much for the sex part of it, but he is obsessed with her and he's just waiting for her to decide to be his queen. So that's where we start this at, is he's trying to get her to be his queen. He's like, I can't do that. I don't want to be involved in what you are. But he will show up and like fuck her at these, and she loves it. And she's actually not allowed to be around her baby brother, again, in the beginning of this book, because her father knows that she's sleeping with Tyrant. So now, like, she doesn't even have access to her little brother, and she's being, like, stalked by this mafia guy who wants to make her his queen. So, yeah. And I don't want to say any more than that. I already said enough. But this was wild, okay? This one is a 5 on the spice scale. We have so many kinks in this one. Story-wise, I gave this one 4 stars. It was completely bonkers, okay? You have to suspend your disbelief all the way in this. And again, this man does threaten to harm a baby. Granted, you don't really believe that he will because of the way that he, like, treats the child, and, like, he doesn't really want... He's like, oh, it'll be a bummer to kill you. Like, you don't really think that he will. But still, there is a present danger to this child, and that part of it. But this one has cock warming. So good in this. Somnophilia, knife play, blood play, primal play, and breeding. So one of the big trigger warnings in this one, again, like this week, it was just heavy. This one has self-harm. So she does cut herself. And when he discovers that, he tells her, you're not allowed to cut yourself anymore. When you want to hurt yourself, call me and I will do the bleeding for you. So there is also period sex, period play kind of, which is weird to say, at a part of this book too. So it has all the spicy things. So this one has self-harm, abusive parents, murder, death, and the child in danger. So this one was wackadoodle, okay? It was crazy, but I ate this up. Like, I ate this up. It was so fun, but I mean... It still is a 4-star read, but highly recommend if you like the wild and crazy, if you like the kinky good times, there it is for you. I have all these books that I mentioned linked down below. If you use the Amazon link down there, it does help out the channel a little bit. If you're interested in supporting the channel, make sure to check out either my Etsy shop or some of the options down below for my Patreon or channel memberships. I put up new videos 3 to 4 times a week, and we'll see you next time. Bye.